The sun rose gently, illuminating the path ahead, its warmth spreading across the serene forest. Buddha walked alongside his disciples. The sound of birdsong filled the air, mingling with the rustling leaves that whispered ancient truths. A serene pond appeared before them, its surface smooth like polished glass. Buddha stopped, motioning for the disciples to gather closer to the edge of the pond. Look deeply into the water, Buddha said, his voice calm and resonant. Tell me, what do you see? The disciples leaned forward, their reflections staring back at them. Distorted by the rippling surface, one disciple spoke hesitantly. Master, we see our faces in the water, but they seem unclear, almost fleeting. Buddha nodded, his gaze never wavering from the pond. The reflections you see, are they truly you? Are they the essence of who you are? The disciples exchanged uncertain glances, their minds grappling with the profound question. Buddha continued, his tone steady. Your thoughts are much like these reflections. They arise, they shift, and they fade, impermanent as clouds in the sky. Kneeling by the water, Buddha touched its surface lightly, sending ripples across the tranquil pond. When the surface of your mind is disturbed, clarity vanishes, and you lose sight of your true nature. Buddha motioned for them to sit near the pond, allowing silence to envelop their gathering. To understand yourself, Buddha said, you must look beyond the surface disturbances to the still depths beneath. One disciple asked softly, Master, how do we look beyond the ripples to see the stillness beneath? Buddha raised his hand, pointing toward the horizon. Stillness exists within you always, but you cannot reach it by clinging to passing thoughts, Buddha explained patiently. Let your thoughts come and go, much like the clouds that drift across the sky, never holding them too tightly. Buddha traced patterns in the dirt beside him, each stroke deliberate and mindful. Your essence is like the deep waters of this pond, unshaken by external disturbances. Another disciple asked, if thoughts are not ourselves, why do they dominate our lives and our actions? Buddha gazed at the pond thoughtfully before responding. You identify with them, mistaking their presence for your identity, Buddha said. Attachment to thoughts creates illusions, binding you to their fleeting nature. The disciples sat still, their breathing synchronized with the calm environment, absorbing Buddha's teachings. Buddha dipped his hand into the water again, watching ripples dissolve into stillness. Observe the ripples without judgment, Buddha continued. Notice how they rise and fade, but know they are separate from the water itself. One disciple murmured, Master, it feels impossible to detach from the thoughts that constantly swirl in the mind. Buddha smiled gently, his gaze soft yet piercing. Detachment does not mean rejecting thoughts. It means recognizing they are not you. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his robes, and motioned toward the sky. The vast sky contains many clouds, but it is never defined by them, Buddha said. Your mind is the sky, not the clouds. The disciples followed Buddha's gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle into their hearts. Buddha began walking again, his footsteps light but purposeful. You cannot control the wind that stirs the pond, but you can cultivate inner stillness, Buddha remarked. One disciple asked, Master, how can we remain grounded when thoughts feel overwhelming? Buddha paused, turning to face them with calm determination. Practice mindfulness. Observe without attachment, and let go of judgment, Buddha said. It takes patience and persistence, but freedom follows. The disciples nodded, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to resolve. Inspired by Buddha's unwavering presence, Buddha picked up a small pebble and tossed it into the pond, watching the ripples spread outward. Do not fear the ripples, Buddha said softly. They are temporary, and beneath them lies unchanging stillness. The disciples watched the ripples fade, the pond returning to its serene state. Buddha smiled knowingly, allowing them to reflect in silence. Time passed, and the disciples began to notice their thoughts, letting them rise and fall without clinging. Buddha observed their progress, his silent encouragement steady like the rising sun. True freedom begins when you understand you are not the ripples, but the still, deep water beneath, Buddha whispered. The disciples breathed deeply, their minds beginning to settle as the forest embraced them. As twilight approached, the disciples felt a growing sense of inner calm, their reflections in the pond clearer than before. Buddha stood, his figure silhouetted against the orange glow of the setting sun, his teachings etched into their hearts. The journey to stillness is not linear, nor is it easy, Buddha concluded, but it is the path to awakening. Another day, another gathering. The disciples awaited Buddha's arrival beneath the shade of towering trees. The village lay quiet in meditation. Buddha approached, his footsteps deliberate, and carried with him an aura of calmness unmatched. The disciples greeted him respectfully, forming a circle around the place reserved for teachings. A villager stepped forward, his face contorted in distress. Clutching a tangled rope, "Master," the villager spoke urgently, "my mind feels bound by its thoughts. Like this knotted rope, I cannot find peace." Buddha accepted the rope with care, observing its tangled knots and twists for several moments. "What binds you is not the rope, but the belief that you are tethered," Buddha said, his voice soothing yet firm. He began to untangle the rope, working slowly, allowing silence to pervade the space between his actions and words. With patience, each knot unravels, Buddha explained, his movements fluid and intentional. "Your thoughts are the same, impermanent, yet seemingly binding when held tightly." The disciples leaned closer, captivated by Buddha's deliberate gestures. A disciple asked hesitantly, "Master, why do thoughts feel so powerful, as if they control our lives and emotions?" Buddha looked at the disciple with deep compassion before responding. "Thoughts dominate because you give them power, mistaking their fleeting nature for permanence," Buddha said gently, continuing to untangle the rope. "Each knot represents an attachment, a fear, or a desire that you hold as part of your identity." The villager watched the rope intently, his distress giving way to curiosity. "Master, how do I release this grip on my thoughts?" he asked, his voice trembling. Buddha placed the partially untangled rope on the ground, its remaining knots still visible. "Loosen your grip," Buddha said softly. "Recognize thoughts as passing phenomena, not as definitions of your existence." A gust of wind stirred the trees, scattering leaves across the gathering, reminding all of the transient nature of the world. Buddha gestured toward the moving leaves, his expression serene. "Do you cling to these leaves as they scatter, believing they belong to you?" Buddha asked, his tone inviting contemplation. The disciples shook their heads, understanding the futility of such attachment. "Yet you cling to thoughts, which are no different," Buddha continued. "They arise, scatter, and fade, much like these leaves." He resumed entangling the rope, each knot coming undone with quiet persistence. A disciple asked, "Master, what happens when thoughts return, persistent and overwhelming, binding us again?" Buddha's gaze softened, his voice steady. "The rope may tangle again, but you have learned to untangle it," Buddha said. "Patience and practice will guide you." The disciples pondered his words, their breaths synchronized with the rhythm of Buddha's movements. The villager sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the rope as Buddha untied its final knot. Freedom is not found in avoiding thoughts, but in seeing them for what they are. Impermanent ripples in your mind, Buddha explained. He handed the untangled rope back to the villager, who held it cautiously, as if transformed by its simplicity. Buddha spoke again, his words resonating deeply. "Your mind is vast, not bound by the contents it holds," Buddha said, Release the need to possess, and you will find peace. The disciples and the villager sat in silence, absorbing the profound clarity of Buddha's teaching. One disciple murmured, "Master, it feels impossible to let go of thoughts entirely." Buddha smiled gently, his presence a wellspring of patience. Letting go does not mean rejecting, but recognizing their nature and allowing them to pass, Buddha replied. Freedom lies in this recognition. Buddha stood slowly, brushing dust from his robes, and motioned for all to rise. As the river flows, it is not bound by the rocks it passes, Buddha said. The river's essence remains untouched. He began to walk, his footsteps light and deliberate, inviting the disciples to follow. The villager remained seated, reflecting on the untangled rope, his grip loose and unburdened. The disciples followed Buddha through the forest, their thoughts quieter than before. Buddha paused beside a flowing stream, its gentle sounds harmonizing with the whispers of the wind. He knelt by the water, inviting the disciples to observe. See how the water flows freely, unbound by obstacles in its path, Buddha said, his tone thoughtful. Your mind must be like this stream. The disciples nodded, their hearts opening to the simplicity and wisdom of his words. One disciple asked, Master, what if the obstacles feel insurmountable, blocking the flow entirely? Buddha smiled, placing his hand gently in the stream, watching the water move around it. Obstacles are transient, like the water that finds its way around my hand, Buddha said. Your mind has the same resilience. The disciples watched the stream, feeling a deep connection to its enduring flow. Buddha rose, his gaze sweeping across the tranquil forest, his teachings flowing like the stream itself. The freedom you seek begins with seeing clearly, beyond the knots and obstacles that cloud your vision, Buddha said. The disciples sat quietly by the stream, their reflections aligning with the clarity of the water. Buddha stood, his figure illuminated by the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. Remember, the untangling is not a single act, but a journey, Buddha concluded, his voice steady. Each knot you unravel brings you closer to freedom. The disciples bowed deeply, their gratitude flowing as freely as the stream. Another day, another lesson. Buddha gathered his disciples under the vast expanse of the evening sky. The air felt still. The disciples formed a circle, their gazes fixed on the fire that crackled softly at the center. Buddha lifted an empty clay cup, holding it high for all to see. What is the purpose of this cup? Buddha asked, his voice resonating amidst the quiet surroundings. The disciples glanced at each other before responding hesitantly. Master, the cup holds water, providing sustenance and utility. Buddha nodded slowly, his hand steady, allowing the firelight to illuminate the contours of the cup. Yes, but what gives the cup its ability to hold? Buddha asked again. A disciple murmured softly, It's emptiness. Master, the space within the cup allows it to contain. Buddha smiled gently, his gaze sweeping across the gathering. Precisely, its emptiness provides purpose and capacity, much like the mind. Yet, we often fill this space with clutter. He placed the cup beside him, its emptiness a silent reflection of his teachings. Thoughts fill the mind until it overflows, leaving no room for clarity or truth to arise, Buddha said. A disciple asked, Master, is emptiness the goal of the mind? To exist without thoughts or desires entirely? Buddha leaned forward, his tone patient but firm. Emptiness does not mean void or absence, but openness, space for truth, mindfulness, and understanding to flourish. Buddha gestured toward the fire, watching its flickering flames dance against the darkened sky. When the fire burns too fiercely, it consumes recklessly, Buddha explained. When thoughts dominate, they consume your awareness and blind you to stillness. Another disciple spoke hesitantly. Master, How do we embrace this emptiness without fearing its vastness? Buddha lifted the cup again, turning it slowly so the firelight glimmered across its surface. Do you fear the emptiness of this cup? Buddha asked softly. Or do you appreciate its ability to hold with purpose? The disciples exchanged glances, understanding the profound simplicity of his question. Buddha continued, your mind's emptiness is not to be feared but cherished. It is the space where awareness and freedom reside. The disciples nodded, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to quiet resolve. A disciple asked, Master, how do we cultivate this openness in the midst of overwhelming thoughts? Buddha placed the cup down gently, his movements deliberate and mindful. Observe your thoughts without attachment, Buddha said. Recognize their impermanence and release the desire to claim them as your own. Buddha reached for a bowl of water, pouring it into the clay cup with quiet precision. When the cup holds too much, it cannot contain anything new, Buddha explained. The mind filled with attachments leaves no room for growth or clarity. The disciples watched the water overflow, spilling onto the ground below. Buddha's actions carried a silent weight, his teachings unfolding without need for embellishment. Empty the cup often, and you will find it ready to hold anew, Buddha said softly. One disciple murmured, Master, I find myself clinging to thoughts, unable to release their hold. How can I truly let go? Buddha gazed at the disciple, his expression compassionate yet steady. Letting go does not mean rejection or avoidance, but seeing thoughts as transient visitors, not permanent residents, Buddha replied. He motioned toward the cup, now emptied of water, its emptiness restored. Thoughts will arise again, as visitors often return, Buddha said, but your openness remains unchanged, ready to receive with clarity. The fire crackled softly, its flames casting shifting shadows on the faces of the disciples. Buddha pointed toward the vast sky above, its infinite depth and unwavering presence. The sky remains boundless, never confined by the clouds that drift across its expanse, Buddha said. Your mind is like this sky. The disciples tilted their gazes upward, allowing the infinite space above to fill their awareness. A disciple asked, Master, how do we find peace amidst the constant flow of thoughts? Peace begins with acceptance, Buddha said. Do not fight the flow, but witness it without attachment, allowing it to pass naturally. He poured water into the cup again, this time stopping before the cup overflowed. Balance is key, Buddha explained. Allow the mind to hold, but remain aware of its capacity, releasing when it threatens to overflow. The disciples sat silently, the simplicity of his actions deepening their understanding. Buddha placed the cup beside him once more, its emptiness a silent companion to the gathering. The cup serves its purpose not in what it contains, but in its ability to hold and release, Buddha said. The disciples meditated on his words, their breaths synchronized with the rhythm of the fire's flickering flames. Buddha's presence carried a quiet wisdom, unspoken yet profoundly felt. The evening deepened, the stars illuminating the gathering with their distant light. Buddha's voice broke the silence again. Look deeply into the space between thoughts, the gaps where emptiness resides, Buddha said. These spaces reveal your true nature. Unbound by fleeting content, Buddha continued. Embrace them, and you will discover the vastness within. The disciples sat still, allowing their awareness to settle into the openness of the moment. Buddha rose, his figure silhouetted against the starlit sky, his teachings etched into the hearts of his disciples. Remember, the journey to openness is not linear, nor is it easy, Buddha concluded. But each moment of emptiness you embrace brings you closer to freedom, Buddha said, his voice steady and calm. The disciples bowed deeply, their gratitude flowing like the firelight that illuminated their path. The birds sang their evening songs, their melodies weaving through the air like threads of existence. As the teachings lingered timelessly. Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.